This is Chris from Chris Loves Crochet and Crochet Recreations, and I am so happy that you guys are here to learn some of the basics of crochet. And what you need for today's lesson is just some yarn and a crochet hook. So the yarn I have is a number 4 worsted. It's one of the most common weights, and I have a 6 millimeter. It says 6 millimeter. It's a size. It's a J size, but what we typically go by is the millimeter. So it's a 6 millimeter crochet hook, and I'm using with a size 4 worsted. So let me first show you how I put the yarn on my hand. So it goes around my pinky, then lay it over my fingers, and then drape it over my forefinger. So I bring it up behind me, wrap it around my pinky, go over my fingers, and then drape it over my pointer finger. And now I can bring my thumb in and hang on to this yarn right here. And when I make a slip knot for my hook, I don't really think about how I do it. So I was practicing this, slowing it down. I don't remember learning it, and so I'm not really sure how to walk through it, but let's try it. So I take my hook, I put it underneath the yarn. This yarn that comes off of your pointer finger is your working yarn. This is your tail. And then your working yarn goes all through your hand and then goes off here and off camera to my skein of yarn. So I take my hook and I put it below this working yarn, and I put my finger on it and I just wrap it around the back of the second one, and then I come back up and I have this yarn that's going over my crochet hook. And so what I'm going to do is grab that yarn. I'm going to grab where it's twisted down here, and I'm going to just take it right through that hole, and I've made a slip knot. This tail you pull to tighten the knot, and then you pull on the working yarn to get it snug on your hook. Now, if you pull it really tight, it doesn't move real easily. So you want to have it so that there's a little bit of space in there so that you can easily move your yarn on your hook. Now to make a chain from this point, and let me just say right here, you know that you can always pause and rewind and rewatch any section that you need to rewatch. So whenever you're making a stitch, you're going to need to grab some yarn. So I hold my hook as a knife. Some people hold it as a pencil. I can't do that. I can't even do it just to show you. I hold it like a knife. And so I have my yarn that's on my pointer finger, and I'm going to drape it around my hook so it gets caught in the notch of the hook, and then I turn it toward the center here, and so that I'm taking the front of the hook down through the hole, the loop, toward the bottom of the V, toward the knot, and pull it through. And there's one chain. Give yourself a little bit of working space here. You can think of it as wrapping the yarn around with your finger, or you can think about it as grabbing it with your hook. And then you turn it a little bit so that you've got the yarn in the crook of your hook, keeping a little bit of tension on it with your finger, and you pull it down with the front of the hook down at the crux of the loop, and you pull it through. So you get some more yarn and pull it through. Some more yarn and pull it through. So I'm turning. That's why you don't want it to be too tight on the yarn to be too tight on your hook. I'm turning my hook as I come up to grab the yarn, and then I turn it back down to take it through. And then I turn it up like this, and I grab the yarn and I turn it down and I pull it back through. Turn it back, grab the yarn, turn it forward so you know that you've got that yarn nice and snug in the hook as you pull it through. And if you're having trouble getting your yarn through that loop, then when you're starting at this point, you're not giving it enough space. So make sure that you bring it all the way down on the shank here. This is what the size 6 is down here. Down here, it's much smaller. So make sure that every time you pull the yarn back up onto the shank, grab your yarn, you can kind of pull back a little bit on your hook, and then you drag your yarn through. So whatever size yarn or whatever size hook you're using, that hook should fit very nicely through that loop that you are making by dragging it always down to the fullest part of this shank. Not onto the handle, just on the fullest part of the shank. So we're turning our hook or grabbing the yarn and we're going for the chain. Now if you get messed up, you don't know where you are, what's going on, you can frog. And frog just means that you rip it out. Rip it like a frog says ribbit. So whenever they say frog it. So you can just pull, if you're just with the 4 worsted yarn, they're pretty easy, as long as you haven't split your yarn anywhere, to just pull back out. I have done rows and rows and rows of just pulling it back out because something went wrong or I changed my mind or something happened. So I take my yarn, I wrap it around my finger, I lay it across these 3 fingers, wrap it around my finger, lay it across these fingers, and then over my pointer finger. Bring my thumb in, grab the yarn against, I grab it against my ring finger, and then I have my middle finger to kind of manipulate if I need to. So I take my hook underneath, wrap it around, go under, come back up. I have to grab where it's twisted and pull that through. Pull on the tail to tighten the knot, pull on the working yarn to tighten onto, to snug it onto my hook. Make sure though that it's not too snug, that you have a little bit of space. And then you just go through and chain. So hopefully that worked for you, and what you end up with, this is the front of the chain where the V's are. Each V is 1 stitch. So we can count, we never count what's on the hook. We count the last completed V. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. This V with the knot on the end, that is a chain. So now what we're going to do is a single crochet. When we do a single crochet, we can't put our hook into this very first chain, because if we did, then we'd just be pulling the yarn right back out. So we always go to the second chain from your hook. This doesn't count. That's your first chain. Oh, scissors. This is your first chain. This is your second chain. First chain, second chain. So we go to the second chain from the hook, this one, and I'm just going to push in through the top part of that V on the chain, grab my yarn, pull it through that V, and then wait, pause, pull it down onto the shank so that it gets to be the right size. This is a 6mm crochet hook, and that's what size I want. And then what I do is I have my yarn around my hook, and I'm going to pull it through both of these loops, both of them. That would be a single crochet. Go to the second chain, push your hook through that top part of the V, grab your yarn, pull it back through the V. You have 2 loops on your hook, grab your yarn, turn your hook down, and you are pulling it through both of those loops. Do that again. Go through the top loop. Pull your yarn through. You have 2 loops on your hook and you've pushed it down onto the shank here. You get your yarn, you wrap it, you push, turn your hook, down so the front of the hook is down at the V. Pull it through those 2. So we have done 3 single crochets. And if you look on the top, so this is what we stitched into. We're going down the chain. So it's starting to grow up this way. If you look on the top, you'll see these V's. And these V's are your stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3 stitches so far. So I put my hook back in, I snugged it back down, not really tight. You want to have some loose so that it can move. Go into the next chain, grab your yarn, pull it up. You have 2 loops on your hook. Grab your yarn, turn your hook down, pull it through. Go into the next chain. Got 2 hooks, 2 hoops on your hook. Turn your hook down with your yarn, pull through both loops. Go into the next chain, pull it up, pull through 2 loops. If your yarn starts curling up, that's okay. It's just that it's just getting started, so it's going to flatten out as we go along. So just look, it flattened out. Go into the chain, grab your yarn, pull it through. You've got 2 loops on your hook. Grab your yarn, turn it toward the convex of the V, pull it through the 2 loops. So this is your single crochet. Single crochet. This is the last, keep moving my paper that's supposed to keep me centered. This is the last chain right here that has the knot on the end. So I'm going to go in there, grab my yarn, pull it through, grab my yarn, pull it through both loops. And that's a single crochet row. Well, 10 of them anyway. And I started off with a chain of 11 because I knew that I had to start in the second chain from the hook. And so you do one, and it's called a turning chain. So we wanted 10 single crochets, and so we did 10 chain plus 1 turning chain. Now, we'll do one more row of singles. Here oops. What am I doing? When I think about it, I can't do it. When you are going to turn and do another row of single crochets, you need to chain 1. We learned how to chain. Turn your work. And now we've got, that doesn't count as a stitch, that chain 1. We have our first stitch. We have our first stitch here. You can see the loops on the top, the V on the top. Here's the V on the top. And so there's a little spot back there that you can poke all the way through. This spot right here, and it goes under the V, like that. Okay? That's where we're putting our stitch. So we're going to go right into the first stitch. We chained 1 and we turned. And now we're just doing another thing of single crochets, but instead of going into the top of the V from the chain, we're going into this whole stitch. So we're going under the entire V. There's the entire V. See? That we're going under 2 loops and through 2 loops. Go through that entire stitch so you have a whole V on top. Grab your yarn, pull it back through. Grab your yarn, pull it through the 2 loops. Trying to leave it so you can see what I'm doing, but I hope you can see it. Here's the second to the last one, and a lot of beginners don't know. It kind of looks like we're at the end, but we're not. We have this stitch right here, this last stitch right here, right before the knot again. So you go under those two V's, pull it through, pull through two. Sometimes you may want to, at the beginning when you're just starting, is to have some stitch markers and mark your first stitch on the row. And that way you know when you get back to it that that's the last stitch that you go into. And do it on both sides. And so you just keep carrying up your stitch markers. So you have like 2 stitch markers, 1 for each side, so you know when you get to the end. So that's the single crochet. Single crochet, there's 2 rows of single crochet. To do a half double, we need a turning chain of 2. And actually this turning chain in a lot of patterns counts as a stitch. So I'm going to turn my work, and then this first stitch right here we're going to skip, because these 2 chains that I just chained, they count as the stitch that's coming out of that first stitch. So I'm going to wrap my yarn for the half double crochet before I go into the stitch, going into the second stitch, and then I grab my yarn and I bring that through, and now I have 3 loops on my hook. Grab my yarn, wrap my yarn, pull through all 3. That's a half double crochet. That's halfway in between a single and a double. And we're going to go through double crochet too. The half double is my favorite to make beanies out of, is the half double. Gives you a little bit more, it still gives you that nice tight look, but then it also gives you a little bit more height than a single crochet. Single crochets are easier to do, but they take a lot longer to get an entire project done, like a blanket or something like that. With single crochet, God love you if that's what you do. Okay, so I'm wrapping my yarn before I go in to the stitch, going into the stitch under the whole V from the stitch, grab my yarn, pull it through, pull it up so all 3 of those loops go onto the shank of the hook so that they're the right size. Yarn over, grab my yarn, turn my hook to where it's facing the fabric, pull it through. Yarn over, go into my stitch, grab my yarn, pull it through, pull it all the way down, yarn over, turn my hook, and I'm pulling up on those hoops just a little bit to make sure that my crochet hook gets through there without snagging on anything. So if we see this right here, we're ending up with more work on the back here, but this is the top of the stitch. Okay, so we have our first stitch here, which is our chain 2. That's our first stitch. Then this is our second stitch, third stitch, fourth stitch, fifth stitch, sixth stitch. That was hard. We're also getting to the point where we can count the posts. So we have chain 2, it's 1, and then we have these posts in here. See them? So there's the 1, that's the double, that's the 2 chain, and then we have a space in here, space in here, space in here, space in here, and then here's this last one. All right, so I'm gonna yarn over before I go into my stitch, yarn over, grab my yarn, pull it through, yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, pull through all 3, yarn over, grab your yarn, pull it through, yarn over, pull it through all three. When you're pulling up a little bit and you turn your hook downward and you pull it through. Now here's my last stitch here. Yarn over and pull through all three. Now let's do one more row. Chain 2, turn. Chain 2 counts as one stitch, so I'm going to skip this first stitch because it already has a stitch even though it's not coming directly out of it. Yarn over, go into the second stitch. Yarn over, pull through all three loops. Yarn over, go into the stitch, grab your yarn, pull it through, yarn over, pull through all three. And you'll get the hang of this. And you'll figure out just the right way to hold your yarn on your hand and just the right way to hold your hook. Whatever works for you is fine. Who says that there's only a knife and a pencil way of holding it? I don't know. I don't know who said that. Whatever way works for you. And whatever way works for you with your yarn too. This just gives me a little bit more control over how fast or how slow it's going. So I am at my second to the last. This is the last actual stitch. Pull through all three. And now I'm at this chain 2. And remember, this chain 2 counts as a stitch. So we don't want to stop here. We want to go into this chain. Now when I go into the chain, what I want to do is to go in behind 2 strands and just leave 1 strand down here, but go under 2 strands. It gives it a lot more heft in the stitch. And doesn't pull apart your work so much. So sometimes it's easier just to grab something, grab a stitch marker, grab something, and get your chain situated where you have a nice hole there. Yarn over, put your hook through, yarn over, pull the stitch through, or the yarn through, pull it down the shank, pull them up without pulling them out. Pull them up as you pull through. Now we have an entire row. The thing about using the chains as a stitch, over here we don't see it yet because we haven't crocheted into it. Once we crochet into it, there's a little bit of a space there. So there's a lot of different tricks, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. For right now, let's just use the chain 2 as your stitch. If you know of a different way, a better way, do it. So we're going to do now a double crochet. So we did a chain, single crochet, half double, and now a double. The height of a double crochet is 3 chains. So we go 1, 2, 3, and turn. And again, in a lot of stitches, in a lot of patterns, that counts as a stitch. So we don't go into this first stitch. We go into the second stitch. We are yarning over again. The single crochet is the only, single crochet and the slip stitch are the only stitches that you're not going to yarn over at least once to do. So get used to yarning over. Yarn over, go through the second stitch. Grab your yarn, pull it through. We have 3 on our hook again, but this is the difference. It's a double crochet. So we do double work on this side. So you grab our yarn, we turn it down a little bit, we pull through 2, and we stop. Then we push it back through so that this new loop is at the right size. Grab our yarn, turn our hook down, and go through the next 2. So that's a double crochet, 1, 2, right? So we yarn over, we go into the next stitch, grab our yarn, pull it through, make sure you push it back onto the shank, grab the yarn, pull through 2, grab the yarn, pull through 2. Go in there, yarn over, pull through 2, push it down, yarn over, pull through 2. Just don't get in the habit of doing your stitches up at the tip like this, or you end up with some really tight things that won't be a very steady gauge for you. So just always make sure that you're pushing your yarn all the way back, well, not all the way back, but onto the shank. Not all crochet hooks have a handle like this, and so when I say all the way back, I don't want you to feel like you have to get it all the way down, but up to, you can see where this is thinner, and then it comes up to the same width all the way down across here. So that's where you want to get your yarn down to. Through 2, through 2. Yarn, pull through 2, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Yarn over, grab your yarn, pull through 2, pull through 2. Now, looks like we're done, doesn't it? Yeah, that's why it would probably be a good idea to use the stitch markers at the end. So when you do your first stitch, which is a chain 3, you're going to put a stitch marker at the top of the chain 3. So again, I want to go into this chain, and I want to go under 2 strands of yarn and leave 1 down here. Go through 2 because there are 3. So I want to go under 2. Just push it through. Grab your yarn, pull it through because you've got 1 underneath, so it's a little hole. Push it back, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that is your double crochet. And again, it's the V on top, not the back V. The V on top that you count. So you count the chain, and then you count this stitch, this V, V, V. So we count the chain as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Where your loop is coming out of is 10. Is a stitch, I should say. Okay, and so now in order to end a piece, when it just says finish off, after I finish my last stitch, I don't want to cut my yarn right here because then it's going to come undone. So what I want to do is chain 1, pull it tight, take my scissors, cut my yarn, and then take that loop, pull the yarn all the way through. And you've got a nice strong knot at the end there and at the beginning, and we'll deal with tails another time. So that was our first tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed that, and you learned something new, reminded yourself of something that you knew long ago or last year and you haven't touched it for a while. So I thank you for your time, and we always have a choice, so please choose happy. Thanks. Bye.